Hi there, everyone. This is Mert, and welcome to the podcast. So today, Pierce was not able to join us, and so I will be the one to take over the podcast for this week. And this week, we're going to talk about memories. Um, what are memories? What do they mean to us? And how can we move forward in life with those kind of memories? Um, I'm just this is more of not like gonna be more of an anecdotal, more like sort of a personal entry kind of uh, episode where I try to not give any like I'm gonna try my best to speak on what memory is to me and how I see it. Um, a lot of times I was asking around people like, what are your first memory is, and I think that's sort of important. Like, what was your first memory? My first memory was when I was alone. No, I was not alone. I was in the backseat of my car with my mom. I think I was 4 years old, and on my left side of the window, I could see a bunch of a swarm of trees passing by, and I'm in the left backseat of the car, and my mom is driving me on this woody, not woody, this road that's full of trees. And I think that was the first moment of memory that I could actually remember consciously. Of course, there are many memories that we don't remember before, like the ages of four, or like even three. And that's because it's a form of amnesia. And there is a word for it. I've forgotten the correct term for it, but it's premature amnesia, something like that, something along the lines of that. And we all go through it. But I think it's interesting to remember the first memory and what it means to you. And I also really wonder what's going to be my last memory. But of course, that's a whole different topic. I think what sort of reminds us existing is memories. I mean, memory is a really crucial part of that. I mean, memory is sort of like the evidence that, hey, you exist. You're not in this. You're not in the matrix. Something along the lines of that. But also, memory is also a reference point. It's a reference point as to where you are right now and who you were back then. It's a reference point of your progression. It's a reference point of how much you've grown and at this rate, where are you going? And that can change, and that can change definitely for a lot of people, like how much you've grown, how much you've changed, how much. And I think everyone changes. Everyone progresses. It's just how. I've met a lot of people who've progressed very significantly, very very significantly, and as well as people who've regressed very significantly, have fallen down so much. And but hey, all's not done. Like, just as you've fallen down, you can go back up. Just as you've risen up, you can go down. um but it's just, again, for me, I look back at my progression with particular evidences, like visual cues. Like, especially, like, I look at my journal entries a lot. I started writing. Um, I started writing my first journal back in 2005. I think that was the very first journal entry that I wrote. I think it was the first. It was around the time of when I actually, already knew writing. I knew how to write. I think like at the ages of like 4 or 5, like five, definitely. And I started writing journals when I was like 7. Yeah. And when I was 7, I started writing my journals, and sort of like I thank my past self for that, because of that I sort of get an idea as to where I was back then. And that's why I think journals are very important for each individual because it shows not. I mean, just by looking at your writing, you can sort of figure out how you were back then, and when you look at how you write things, like back then, I remember my writing. It was like extremely like well written. Well, I was really good at you know I was writing the alphabets very perfectly, very, very good. And then as time progressed, it got more shittier and shittier as time passed on. But it's sort of this interesting because even though when I was a kid, the way I wrote, the letters and the words, even while they were perfect, I was writing about things such as very simple things like today I did this, I went there, I went this, and I wasn't really focused on how I was feeling it. I didn't really have a, you know, you know, self-reflection as to what that day meant to me. So, I didn't really focus on, you know, if this really made me sad or if this really made me pissed off. What do I feel about this? But as time went on, especially during my early teens, very, very early teens, like 11, 12 years, I started noticing my handwriting started to become more weird, become a little bit more, off. And the things and the content was also off. A lot of times it was just this. I was more self-reflective. I was more, you could say chaotic. I was just writing more about what was inside, what was the world inside me than the world outside. And the more you go deep, and the more I got deep and deep and deep, it's sort of my handwriting started to get like all squished up, and now it is that way it is, I guess. So a lot of my parents, they said like, you had such perfect handwriting and now it's just awful. And I guess that's one of the reasons. I mean, there could be many reasons. Maybe I just got lazy with the letters and stuff, but maybe, subconsciously, maybe it's a result of, my personality as it went by through time. Maybe during my early childhood years, it was a bit more, I'd say, conflictual, more chaos was led in my life. And so just as the content got a little bit more chaotic, just as the feelings got a little bit more, mushy and, not, good, or how can I say, it's not good or bad. It's more of a case of, structured, I wouldn't say it was, I had to worry about a lot of things. I had to, be more anxious about a lot of things as, of course, just as like any teenager, but I guess the way I, sort of perceived my own reality was a little bit more chaotic. And so maybe that's how the content changed, and as the content changed, the handwriting changed, and maybe that's a way to explain all things. And especially like, you also see, I like to write, and so it's an interesting thing to look back at your writing and your own thoughts and how much you've changed as, just not as a person who writes, but as a person who thinks. You look at how much your political views have changed. You look at how much, I think I would say, my achievement. I think I would say when I was a little bit more, back then, I would say my political thoughts were going back and forth between the left and the right. Of course, everyone's idea of what left and right is, changes between like someone from the left in Turkey is going to be very different than the person who's, on the left in America. Definitely. I do believe that. Left and right are not really universal, they don't have really a universal language in terms of politics, it really depends on where you're at and which country at what time. But going back to me, I'd say, my, even just by looking 1 year back at my own writing, I could see a very vast change in, like, you sort of understand where like how much you've grown just by the fact that you're criticizing your own, writing. Like you're like, you didn't write it the right way. That's not a good argument. And back then while you're writing it, you're sort of, oh my God, this is such a great argument I'm writing right now. I'm thinking so good. And then, go, fast forward 2 years later, you look back at yourself like, what the hell were you thinking, man? And that's sort of important. It's a good thing. Like that ability to criticize yourself is a showcase that you've become more wise and become more smart. And you're going to go definitely, probably the stuff that I'm thinking right now, my 10-year-old me later on is going to be like, nah, you're shit. Like you haven't got it right. You still have a lot of way to go. But, and it's also, interesting in terms of like memories and like in the photographs. It's like devils in the details. Like you look at a photo, it's like, oh my God, yeah, I remember this. But like if without that cue, without that photograph, would you actually remember it? Would you, like, without that memory, if somebody told you, yeah, I remember that time we were in, let's say in that house and we got, we were making, this and this and whatever, like, I don't know, pancakes and stuff and whatever. And then somebody comes along and they're like, yeah, I remember. I think I still remember. Somebody shows you a photograph and then you're like, oh yeah, now I remember. Like, those moments, those memory cues. It's interesting that, you lose so much information across time. And the photographs are like sort of are one of those many millions of information that, that you sort of, pushed it back in the storage of your mind. And just by showing that photo or that, visual image, you sort of go back to that moment. And I always wonder, what if I did not have that photograph? Would I be able to remember those memories? And it's like, without the photographs, without any of this, would I be able to have a clear understanding of like sort of who I am, or like would I be, what sort of evidence would there be for me to sort of see that I do exist, or that I do, I have grown, or I have, become a more different person than I was, years back. And maybe, yeah, you could sort of have an idea, but I guess the visual cues or the audio, the visual cues of, photographs and the journal entries, they sort of help you out along the road. But I do think it's funny because like we process so much information, so much sensory information, and our minds is hardwired to make things as simple as it possibly can for us to work with. And yet there's so much information out there that we process with our senses, and still we only take in only very particular moments. Like, but what are those particular moments? What makes me remember, like, what makes me so vividly remember the forest back in my mom's car that makes it worthy of it keeping in my head? Like, what does that mean? Or what does it mean for me to remember, that moment where I got, when it was the first day of school? Is it because it's the first day of school, or something else happened the first day of school? Or that other moment where that time I was bullied in high school. Like that moment when there was this one moment where or that time when I was dragged into the floor on the ground back in like what, sixth grade, and like says there's this bunch of kids who are like pushing me. Like I can vividly remember that moment, and what time it was. I know it was after school, and I was like walking down with my bags, and then there was a bunch of group of kids. I don't remember who they were, but I did remember what they did. And then like them pushing around and stuff, or like after that, like the moment where I became president in eighth grade, and like how that felt and what I did, and like how everyone was congratulating me. But of course, there's like a lot of blanks in the middle, just like they just all those stuff are gone, and I take value in the little stuff sometimes. You know what I mean? It's just those little tiny details sort of give you savior in life. It's the details, it's the little tiny details that you're just like, oh my God, yeah. And it feels, those little details just gives life more authenticity than the bigger, the bigger moments of your life. Of course, they're worthy and important, but I don't know, just sometimes like sometimes you just want to remember that moment where you're walking down the seaside, and everything's calm and quiet. You just really want to remember and go back to that moment, but of course you're censored. Of course you don't really remember that much. There has to be some, emotional cue to bring you back to it. I think a moment that sort of something like that happened to me back this year in Dublin. I was it was I think I was like I think 2 days before I was gonna leave for Bodrum. I was gonna go to Turkey, back to Turkey, and then I was going to. Okay, so this is what specifically happened. Yeah, I'm retracting my memory back. So I took a plane ticket to the set to the place where Sing Street got shot. Okay, where it was shot, and I went there. And after I went there, I took the train back. But I stopped at a place where I forgot the place's name. Yeah, this is the thing with memory. Just like there's some things you just really remember, and there's some stuff information you don't remember. Like I think I'm a very visual. I'm really good with visual cues. Like if somebody tells me, "Remember that movie?" I can really tell what the plot is, what the plot was, and what happened in the end, and who the characters were. Like I can really remember a lot of movies and a lot of paintings and a lot of photographs. But like words, like verbal memory is not with me. I cannot remember verbal stuff. Like I can't remember a name. I'm good with faces, but I'm terrible with numbers and names and all that kind of stuff. Like I think, yeah. Anyways, going back. So I stopped in the place and stopped in the stop. It was this place where it was a beach, but the sea was drawn so much back, like miles and miles it was back, and the sand and the land was very moist and soft. And so, there was no one there. There was no one there, and I just walked there, took off my shoes, and I was bare feet, and I was just walking along that, seaside or beach kind of thing, and it was almost like right now as I'm remembering it, I remember it was one of the most peaceful moments of my life. It was just so calm and so quiet. There was no sound at all, and so it's like, after that, I do remember someone coming up to me with their dog, and then I don't remember the guy's name. Again, I'm terrible with names, but I remember the dog and I remember the guy, and we had this, we walked along this seaside talking and chatting, and I do remember the guy was this engineer, industrial engineer, working for the housing market. Ireland has this little tiny housing crisis going on. and so he's working on that in that part of the industry. But he was a very nice gentleman. He was pretty cool. And so like this is like this is a very small, it's not a big moment in my life. But for me personally, if it was, because for many other reasons, like it was a very peaceful, like I've never been to a place like that, where I was that peaceful and calm. And I think like maybe going to Dublin, that's what I was looking for. I mean, of course, there were other things like um, whiskey, and beer, and factories, and Irish history. I really love Irish history. They're pretty cool. But of course, going to Dublin alone, you just sometimes when you say you're looking to make some memories, sometimes they're the memories that you least expect. You know what I mean? Anyone? This is funny. This is really funny. But yeah, and like also like I do remember, and also I think memories like it's specific in picking out the moments that are the least you know monotone ones. Like if you like people will remember the weekends more than the weekdays for many particular reasons, because the weekends are the times when it's most exciting. You're with your friends and you do things that are out of the norm. You know what I mean? You go to a bar, you go to a club, or you hang out with friends, or you chill with somewhere, and then you're like, you know, you know, there's more dynamic in those moments, rather than going to the same subway, going to the job, going to class, or going to like when your life. I think that's the thing. When your life is going at the same pace, at the same time, at the same ritual, is you're gonna forget it. That's why you have to make it so savory and dynamic and different within the boundaries of that structured life. That's like, for example, even when you're having fun, if you're doing the same fun shit, you're gonna forget it. That's why you always have to find new things, even when you're having fun. Like when I was in Bodrum, right on the top of my head, I knew I can remember specific moments that were out of the ordinary. I don't remember what I was drinking or what we did. Like because we were pretty much doing the same thing over and over again for like 2 weeks. I mean, I stayed longer, but like I'm taking context of with my friends, with the same people, at the same place. We were pretty much doing the same thing every day. We were going to the club, go to the club, beach club, go to the nightclub, sleep, wake up, breakfast, beach club. Like it was the same thing over. Like I don't really specifically remember. What I do remember is the specific times when it was out of the ordinary within the context of that structured, boardroom nightlife. And it's the moments that, that give savor that you remember. I remember the things that I'll remember the most of that holiday is like when me my friends watching the final cup, and two of them are Russian, Emin and Anastasia, and they're like swearing in Russian, and like I remember the intensity of that moment as the final penalty was hit. That moment, or like the moment when we drank Dom, which is like way out of the ordinary. Thank you, Anastasia, for that. But or I like remember the times when I'm like flipping while I'm jumping from a ramp. Like that kind of stuff is the stuff that you remember. Or like the moments when like one of your friends gets shit faced like really really hard on the first day of Bodrum. Those sort of are like the cue memories that you'll remember, because they're out of the ordinary, even within the context of a fun, Bodrum nightlife. And, just That's why it's like, that's why these kind of things are important. You have to understand that if you're doing the same thing all over again, if you're doing the same shit every day, every moment, every night, doing the same stuff, talking to the same people, talking the same topic all the time, you're gonna have a forgetful life. And then you're gonna lose your sense of existence. You're gonna lose, like, wait, I can't even remember the last 2 weeks, like, because I mean, there was that moment where I was doing the same shit all over again, and you ever have that feeling where you were like, weeks pass by like that, and you can't remember a single moment within those past weeks. All you know is that you did one thing, and that was like either like meeting people or talking people, but like it was the same rudimentary, process, instead of doing something that was like a little bit more significant or a little bit more different. And I think that's why like people will always remember the weekends rather than the weekdays, because weekends are like, they're awesome. Shit happens. Memories that are worth remembering. But I think the most thing that I'm most afraid of is having Alzheimer's disease. I don't know how it is particularly, but I do remember having a relative who had Alzheimer's, and it was the most scariest thing I had, because it's like the fact that I will lose every single memory I have of everyone that I've known, everything I did as a person, and all it just fading out is just an unbearable thought. So maybe that's what I'm most afraid of. I guess one of the most things I'm afraid is forgetting a lot of the most important things in my life. I mean, I'm not so much as concerned as being forgotten or, people forgetting me. Because even though people forget you, you can sort of have a sense of, you can sort of understand that you had an effect on other people's lives, even though they've forgotten you. They've, or even like if history has forgotten you. Like, here's the thing: we're all gonna be forgotten. Nevertheless, we're gonna be forgotten after we die. But what's more important is the impact that we've given throughout our environment, throughout our community. I think being remembered is more of a selfish thing, Like, yeah, you want to be remembered, but you're going to be forgotten in the long term, nevertheless. In the short term, yeah, you may be remembered for a little while, but, time treats you badly. Time is a bitch, and it will make sure that your name or whatever is going to be fade out. But the echo of your existence is, I think, more important than you being remembered. The impact that you give around people, or like the impact that you give in the present now for the future, and it's even better if, like, even after you die, even if after you die, your current actions or your past actions affecting the future and echoing throughout the future, even though people don't know it was specifically you, the fact that they're affected by your actions, and that those actions being echoed throughout, time and space, I think is more a noble goal. And I think that's an interesting thing to remember, to think about. maybe I can get back on that whole echo thing, but in another time. But hey, this is, well, I think I'm going overtime, but this was a very interesting conversation. Well, interesting monologue, I would say, having with you all. I hope you stick around to listen to more. And if you ever think I should think about other things, or should, have my strings up taut to be on a specific topic, hey, leave a comment or, send me an email, whatever. Peace out. Take care, guys.